Have you ever thought about how ancient laws weren't always just about, crime and punishment?
Right.
That some were actually these really radical blueprints for society,
Yeah.
designed to, like, hit a reset button every so often.
A societal reset, exactly.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of system. I've got a really fascinating source in front of us. It's excerpts from Leviticus 25, and it details these things called the Sabbath and Jubilee, laws of the land.
Yeah, it's quite something. And our mission today really is to unpack these ancient rules. We want to get beyond just the text itself
Right.
and understand the practical side of things. What did they actually mean for people's lives?
And what can we learn from them today?
Exactly. We're looking for those modern insights on big topics, land ownership, debt, social justice, even sort of environmental thinking, looking for those aha moments,
So first up is this idea called the Sabbath year. Imagine this. Every seventh year, the land itself, the ground was supposed to rest.
Yeah, the instruction is pretty clear in the source. When you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath.
So you farm for 6 years, right? Sow your fields, prune your vines.
Normal agricultural work.
But then, year 7, complete stop. The land gets a full year of Sabbath rest. No sowing, no pruning.
It's a pretty radical concept, is letting everything pause for a year.
Definitely.
But what's really fascinating isn't just the rest, it's who benefits. The text says, do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. Okay, rest for the land.
Makes sense.
But then it adds, whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you. And listen to who you includes. For yourself, your male and female servants, the hired worker, the temporary resident living among you.
So everyone.
Pretty much, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals. It's like the land's natural, unforced production becomes a shared resource for the entire community and even the ecosystem during that year.
A kind of common pantry provided by the earth itself.
Yeah, it suggests this deep social contract.
Yeah.
Basic needs met for everyone, built right into the system, not just an afterthought.
Okay, but the obvious practical question comes up immediately, right? If you're not farming for a whole year, what do you eat? How do you survive?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. And the text actually anticipates it directly. It poses the question, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops?
So what's the answer?
The answer given is, well, it's pretty bold. It says, I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years.
3 years, from one harvest.
That's the promise. Enough food from the 6th year's bumper crop to last the entire 7th year of rest, and even into the 8th year while you're planting, until the new harvest comes in, which would actually be in the 9th year, cycle-wise.
Wow. So that requires a huge amount of, trust.
Trust, absolutely. And some serious long-term planning built into the whole system, relying on that previous abundance.
Okay, so that's the Sabbath year, a yearly pause.
Yeah.
But then things get even more dramatic.
Oh yeah, this is where it scales up massively. Building on that Sabbath cycle, you get the year of Jubilee, a profound societal reset.
Right, it's described as happening after 7 cycles of those Sabbath years.
Exactly. Count off 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbath years amount to a period of 49 years.
49 years.
Then you consecrate the 50th year. And this wasn't some quiet personal thing. No, it says on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. A really significant day. A trumpet sounds everywhere.
Throughout your land.
National announcement, a huge one. And the core message blasted out. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. Liberty. Imagine hearing that trumpet.
Especially if you are in debt. Or maybe even forced to sell yourself into service.
Precisely. It signals immediate freedom and restoration.
And this liberty seems to have 2 main parts, according to the text.
That's right, 2 huge pillars.
First, it says, it shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan.
Back to your roots, your ancestral land. That's massive.
And second, just like the Sabbath year, it's another year of agricultural rest. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the untended vines.
So rest for the land again, but also this huge social and economic reset focused on property and people.
Let's dig into that property part. The idea of returning land is, it's foundational.
It really is. And to understand why, you have to look at the underlying principle they state. The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine.
Meaning God's land.
Exactly. And you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. It's a theological claim with enormous practical consequences. Humans are stewards, temporary residents, not ultimate owners.
Okay, so if you can't sell land permanently, how do transactions work? People must have needed to transfer land sometimes.
They did, but it wasn't a sale of the land itself, not really. The text explains. If you sell land or buy land, do not take advantage of each other.
Right.
You are to buy on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee, and they are to sell to you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops.
Ah, so the price depended on how close the next Jubilee was.
Precisely. If the Jubilee was, say, 40 years away, you paid more because you were buying rights to more harvests. If it was only 5 years away, you paid much less.
Because what you were really buying was?
The number of crops. The text says it explicitly. You were essentially buying a lease tied to the Jubilee cycle. It prevented land from concentrating in a few hands forever.
Clever. But what if someone fell on really hard times and had to sell their lease early? Were they just out of luck until Jubilee?
No, there was a safety net built in, a right of redemption. It says, if one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold.
A family obligation to buy it back.
Yes. And if there wasn't a relative who could, or if the original seller later prospered, they could redeem it themselves by paying back the value for the remaining years until Jubilee.
Okay.
But even if none of that was possible, what was sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and they can then go back to their own property.
So the Jubilee was the ultimate backstop. You couldn't permanently lose your family's connection to the land.
Exactly. It guarantees that return no matter what.
Now, I noticed there's a curious distinction made about houses. It wasn't quite the same as land, was it?
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail. It depends on where the house was. If you sold a house in a walled city,
Like a major town.
right, you had 1 year to redeem it, a full year. But if you didn't redeem it within that year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to the buyer. It is not to be returned in the Jubilee.
Huh. So city real estate could be permanently sold.
Seems like it. Maybe seen as more of a commercial asset. But contrast that with houses in villages without walls around them.
Rural homes.
Yeah. Those were considered belonging to the open country. And just like the fields, they were returned in the Jubilee.
Interesting distinction. What about the Levites? The priestly group?
They had special status. Their houses and their designated towns and even the surrounding property were always redeemable and always returned in the Jubilee. It ensured they always had their place, their base.
So the Jubilee is clearly massive for land and property.
Right.
But it went further, didn't it? Into social justice, poverty?
Absolutely. It wasn't just an economic reset, it was a social one too. Tackling poverty and personal liberty head on.
Yes.
Well, first, there's a direct command. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves, help them as you would a foreigner and stranger so they can continue to live among you.
Communal support as a basic obligation.
Yes, not charity, but a duty. And crucially, it tackles exploitation. Do not take interest or any profit from them.
No usury.
Right, but fear your God. You must not lend them money at interest or sell them food at a profit. A clear block against profiting from a neighbor's poverty within the community.
And what about people who became so poor they had to sell themselves? Was that slavery?
This is a really, really important distinction the text makes. It says, if any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves.
Not slaves. How were they treated then?
They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee.
Ah, so it was a time-limited indenture tied to the Jubilee.
Exactly. Then, in the Jubilee, they and their children are to be released, and they will go back to their own clans and to the property of their ancestors. Full restoration.
And the reason given?
It's explicit. Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly. There's a shared history, a shared identity as servants of God that prohibits treating fellow Israelites as mere property.
And redemption was possible before Jubilee, too.
Yes, the same rules as land applied. Relatives could redeem them, or they could redeem themselves if they got the means. The price was calculated based on the remaining years of service until Jubilee, like a hired worker's wages.
But always the Jubilee was the final release date.
Always. Even if someone is not redeemed, They and their children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. Liberty was guaranteed.
Now, we have to address the difficult part here. This protection didn't apply to everyone, did it?
No, and it's crucial to be clear about this context. The text makes a very stark contrast. It says, regarding non-Israelites, your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves.
So, foreigners could be enslaved.
Yes. And it continues, temporary residents living among you. They will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life.
Slaves for life, a huge difference.
A profound difference. It immediately follows with, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. It highlights that this unique system of Jubilee release and protection against permanent servitude was very much tied to that specific covenant community. It wasn't a universal abolition, but an internal safeguard.
Okay, so stepping back from all these details, what does this whole system, Sabbath year, Jubilee, really tell us? It's incredibly complex, incredibly deliberate.
It really is. When you connect all the dots, what emerges is this profound effort to stop wealth and power just endlessly accumulating in the hands of a few.
Right, the land keeps returning.
Exactly. And at the same time, it builds this powerful safety net against people falling into permanent poverty or debt traps. It ensures families keep that connection to their ancestral land, which in that society was everything. Livelihood, identity.
And there's that ecological element, too, the land getting its rest.
Yes, an awareness that the land itself needs care. So the whole system seems designed to foster social cohesion, a degree of equality, preventing that permanent underclass, that group of people with no stake in society. It's a vision that really pushed against the common tendencies of economic history.
It's kind of mind-blowing to imagine a society hitting Creole plus Alt plus Delete every 50 years on the economy. Debt's gone, land back.
Yeah.
It was radical then, and honestly, it sounds pretty radical now.
It does.
It definitely forces you to ask some hard questions about our own systems, about economic justice, sustainability. What does it mean for everyone to genuinely have a chance, generation after generation?
It's like the society was saying, look, one bad run of luck, one drought, one poor decision, that shouldn't doom your entire family line forever.
Right.
And this ancient blueprint, it throws up this big question for us today, doesn't it? If we could press some kind of periodic reset button on our economy, what would that even look like? What if we thought about ownership more like temporary stewardship? What if debt couldn't just permanently chain families down? What impact might that have on the deep inequalities we see?
So, to sum up then, we've seen the Sabbath year, this pause for the land, providing for everyone, and the Jubilee, this grand societal equalizer, turning property, freeing people from debt servitude.
It's this vision, really, of economic and social fairness deeply connected to the land itself, a truly foundational way of structuring a community.
Yeah, and it leaves us with a powerful challenge, I think. If the whole point back then was to stop permanent disadvantage, to make sure everyone had a stake, well, what are the persistent inequalities we live with?
Right.
Could some kind of Jubilee thinking help address them? And what would the real cost, or maybe the profound benefit of that kind of radical redistribution actually be? A lot to chew on there, definitely, as always. We hope this deep dive into these really quite amazing ancient laws has given you some surprising things to think about, and maybe some new angles on justice and land today.